Hey, welcome to Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicast and in partnership with Vertical Valor Magazine. In this special two-part series, which is 5 years in the making, due to the fact that we're celebrating the 5th anniversary of the Hangar Z Podcast, Jack Schonely and I reflect on the journey of the podcast, its impact in the aviation community, and the inspiration drawn from guests like Jell-O, the host of the Fighter Pilot Podcast.
It's probably the most important thing we do in naval aviation and at Top Gun. And I've said that if you want success, you have to plan and you have to brief. But if you want to learn, you have to debrief, because you need to go back and say, this is what we intended to do.
I like that.
And this is what we went out and did. And we did some things differently, but why? Or we did it right, but it didn't work. And why? Or, and this is key, a lot of people don't do this, or companies don't do this. We did it right and it worked. Why? And so I think you need to look at assumptions. You need to look at your plan and whether it worked or not. I think debriefing is hugely critical, because it really brings everything closed and allows you to process all these different things. Yeah, we meant to do this, but we did this instead. And it's because of this faulty assumption or this change in the weather or this fallout, right?
Each year, I select a special guest to help celebrate the anniversary of the Hangar Z Podcast. I look for a guest that's uniquely shaped our community or directly inspired the creation or direction of the Hangar Z Podcast. Today's guest directly inspired the creation of the Hangar Z Podcast, as the Fighter Pilot Podcast was the first aviation podcast that I listened to and enjoyed. I spent many hours commuting back and forth from the Ontario PD Air Support hangar listening to the Fighter Pilot Podcast. Listening to that podcast, along with others like the Team Never Quit podcast, helped me discover the format and style that would eventually evolve into the Hangar Z Podcast. Though at the time, that was never my goal. Today, we welcome an accomplished naval aviator with over 8,964 days of active duty, 3,807 flight hours, and 705 carrier landings, 263 of which were at night. His combat missions include 78 flights over Iraq and 187 days in Afghanistan. He's experienced 12 moves. His career is filled with remarkable memories. Please join me in welcoming Vincent and Aiello to the Hangar Z Podcast. Thank you to our sponsors, Metro Aviation, Shotover, and CNC Technologies.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
Just to connect the dots quickly for the audience. So didn't sign up to be a Marine. Instead, found my way into a 2-year ROTC scholarship and a transfer to UCLA just up the road there in Southern California. And so after completing that, although the transfer and my own academic prowess or not, made it that I didn't graduate with the rest of my class in June of, or May was it? Anyway, of 1992. I had a summer school class to go. And so I was able to have a ceremony by myself, and a family friend who had been a retired Navy pilot offered the oath of office to me. And so we had our own ceremony there in Chatsworth. And a buddy of mine from high school who had enlisted in the Coast Guard had agreed to put on his uniform and come render the first salute to me as a brand new officer. And the tradition in the military is you give that individual a silver dollar. The ceremony itself, even though it was at a park and other people were having picnics and doing things, we got dressed up into our whites, choker whites in my case, and took the oath, and then had the insignia on my shoulder boards changed by my 2 brothers and my hat changed by my mother. And it became right in everyone's, in front of them, a midshipman to an officer, like a caterpillar to a butterfly kind of thing. And as I was walking away and they were clapping, my friend Robert Cottle stepped out of the crowd and walked up and rendered me a very sharp salute. And I was holding at that point my little folder with my basically officer, I don't know if it was the oath or anyway, it was at that time President Bush saying, welcome, you're now an officer in the United States Navy. I reach into my pocket knowing full well it's not there, but I'm no actor, but I thought I did a pretty good job that day. Like, oh shoot, where is it? So then kind of handed him the folder, reached to my other, kind of took my hat off, looked in there, it wasn't in there. Well, I had put it in my sock. And so I had to lift up my pant leg, grab the sock, presented it to him and returned his salute. And then we ended up in a big bear hug, and he's still friends to this day. In fact, he lives up near Fresno and is coming down this weekend. I hope to see him.
That's
and
cool.
So it was, I put the story in the book, and then I made a little anecdote to kind of end that vignette, if you will, that was me. I was, true to tradition, which was the ceremony itself and as well as the silver dollar, but always looking for a little fun when I could. And in that moment, right, you don't want to have fun when there's guys on the ground getting shot at. And you're like, oh, I'm going to play a joke. No,
right.
It's when the time is right.
Yep.
And in that moment, it was at the end of the ceremony, and it just seemed the right thing to do. And it sort of broke the ice too. Now people know, hey, we can relax and have fun now, because everyone's like, oh, should I stand at attention? And so it was a fun little, it's not incident. I don't know what else to call it, but it was fun.
Yeah, I love the story. The first thing I'll touch on is tradition. I love the traditions that you guys have. I wish that we incorporated more of that into law enforcement. We do have some traditions which I love. I think everybody can remember who was in the room, who was with them at their swearing in ceremony, where my dad and my wife with Ontario pinning my badge on me, and that was a really proud moment for me. Jack, for you, who was with you when you were sworn in at LAPD?
64 classmates. It was just, it wasn't, we didn't do that. That tradition was like not there at the time. This is 83, 84. When you got your badge, wasn't a big ceremony. It wasn't a big swearing in. It was just kind of at the academy with your classmates. So that's changed over the years, but that's how it was then. The big one was air support.
Yeah, I was going to say,
when you get your wings,
Yeah.
And again, it's changed. It used to be that you'd get your wings, you'd land from your final check ride as a tactical flight officer or a pilot. So I got to do this twice. And you'd land, you'd get your wings presented to you. Family would be there to pin those on. And then in the old days, you'd immediately get handcuffed, and they stripped your boots off, and you were handcuffed to a drainage grate in the middle of the heliport, and a fire ship would come in and dump a load of water on you. I mean, before they dumped a load of water on you, you get pummeled with eggs, ketchup, mustard, all the condiments, all the condiments.
A bath.
That's right. You were all sweaty and dirty. So you needed a bath from all this crap on you. I remember pictures of my daughter did not like it. My son loved it. Yeah, he was out there. I got pictures of him putting mustard on me and everything. But of course, that's hazing.
Yeah.
And they did away with it. And it's much more professional ceremony now. But in hindsight, that was the best thing, because it was tradition. It was a great tradition. It should still be there today.
Yeah, the wing pinning ceremony you guys do, I think I've told you before, it inspired us in Ontario. Derek Alatorre actually took that and implemented that when he earned his wings.
Yeah.
And prior to that, you accomplish arguably one of the hardest things in your life. You finish your commercial rating, you're done, and it was anticlimactic. Okay, congratulations, you're done. Go fly. I just almost killed myself 10,000 times, and I accomplished my dream. And there's no mark of celebration. It was just go do your thing.
No ketchup, no mustard.
But I think it's important to recognize those times in our life when you've literally hung out in the line to accomplish a goal and a dream that you've had. So I'd love that you guys brought that ceremony in, and it's it's alive and well as far as I know today, right?
That's for the silver dollar. Is that still
my
still
knowledge,
the way?
I've not been to a commissioning ceremony in a number of years, actually. So, but I assume so. I mean, the Navy's coming up on its 250th anniversary or birthday, and so I would assume so. It's a very tradition-bound service.
That is cool.
The second part I'll touch on is what you talk about, and you said you're always on the lookout for a little fun. I feel like a lot of us in this industry, well, some of us, I should say, not a lot of us, take ourselves a little too serious. And I love what you wrote, because while there is a time and place for that serious demeanor, there's also a time and place to loosen up a little bit, because it's a stressful environment that we live in, right? Especially for you guys. Talk about that a little bit. Some of the things that you did to kind of get rid of that edge a little bit, to, I don't want to say pull a prank on somebody, but the things you did to lighten the mood a bit. What was some of the best things that you saw, whether you did it to somebody or someone did it to you, What were some of the funny things that you were involved with or saw as far as pranks go?
Oh gosh, I mean, we had everything. And I think to your point, right? It's call it a coping mechanism when you live in a very consequential world. It's also just a way to have a little fun again when the time permits. I mean, when I'm landing on the aircraft carrier and I'm seconds from touching down, I wouldn't expect the landing signal officer who's out there controlling it to suddenly just wave me off because it would be funny.
Right.
So you have to know when the timing is right. But I mean, we had pranks from, putting something in someone's chair on the carrier when you're out at sea for months at a time, just because you need to keep it light. Or the things we would hang over our seats. I talk about that in the book as well. If a guy had the last bolter, that's where you intend to land, but you miss. Well, they would take one of the literal bolts out of the tail hook and put it on a string and hang it over your chair. And so it's like, hey man, sorry, you had the last bolt, you get or the last bolter, you get the bolt. And then of course, anytime when the situation permits and you're off duty and alcohol is involved, there's all kinds of shenanigans. And I mentioned in the book, being at my tie cutting ceremony, which is where they acknowledge all of those who've recently soloed for the first time. And as we were leaving, it was an outdoor venue and my wife was driving because she's more disciplined than I. And it was such that the passenger side was on the group there. And I said, hey, slow down a second. And I rolled down the window and I think she thought I was going to say something to someone, but instead I showed them a part of my anatomy that they don't normally get to see and don't want to stare at very long, and honked the horn and drove off. And it was a good laugh, but probably traumatic for them. And it certainly was embarrassing for my poor wife. Sorry, honey.
Poor
wife. She's in the other room listening.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, those are the kind of things that are hilarious. You look back and you always remember those, right?
Oh yeah.
Jack, I won't ask you to embarrass yourself like that. But if you want to offer a story, I'll open the door.
No. There's too many. Oh my gosh. But one more thing, a tradition for Navy. I'm curious. Do they still have a ceremony when you're on the ship and you're carrying an aircraft carrier? Do they still have a ceremony for those that go over the equator for the first time? And if so, tell us about that.
Yes, the line crossing ceremony. I was a lieutenant commander on my third deployment before I actually did that.
Wow.
Again, hazing is no longer allowed, but it's as fun as they can make it for tradition without demeaning anyone too much. And it's just, you got to go through this little crucible to get to a point where they'll hose you down and you're now clean. You're a real sailor. You've been south of the equator.
Yeah.
And, I think every ship probably does it a little different. Aircraft carriers can get very elaborate because there's so many people and there's so much space. I'm imagining destroyers and cruisers maybe have something, but I don't know. I never served on one of those. It's just, it's just one of those things where if you approach it in the nature and the spirit in which it's intended, yeah, you might have to eat something that looks gross. It's not going to be unhealthy. It just looks gross. Yeah, you might get hosed down with green colored water, or you got to run through this little bath of looks like Jell-O or something. Or it looks like something other than that.
Yes.
And then again, you get hosed off at the end and there's redemption. And if you just don't take it personally, it's fine. But there's always somebody who's like, I don't want to do that's the meaning. So I did it as a lieutenant commander and, I just went along with it.
And they keep track of who's done that and who hasn't carefully, because you can't dodge that, right?
Well, you can. You're just going to take a lot of grief for it. You might as well go get it done in a couple hour ceremony than the rest of your career.
I have old photos from my grandfather on the USS Nevada, and in the I think the early, well, I don't want to screw it up. I think it's the 20s, but of that ceremony. And I remember looking at him for the first time and going, what is going on this ship?
Back then you probably ended up with lashes and welts and things on your body afterwards.
It looked interesting. And then I remember my dad saying, that's what this is what that is. And my pop talked about that regularly. And he passed when I was young, so I didn't get to hear the stories firsthand, but my dad remembers all of them. And that was one that was always fascinating to me.
Well, cool, and when it was only males on the ship, evidently clothing at some point evaporated because you needed to be thoroughly cleansed or whatever.
Yes.
But again,
that's great.
Yeah. Anyway,
that's funny. Well, I want to shift gears and talk about training. Earlier I talked about how our communities are aligned in a lot of ways. talking about the challenges that we faced in flight training. I referenced it earlier. I certainly had a lot of challenges. Aviation was my dream ever since I was a kid. And I was selected to become a pilot, go to flight school, and here I am struggling, wondering if I'm going to make it. Talk about how hard hovering was. That was, man, so hard. And we joke now, like there's a hover button. Like at some point you find the hover button and you can do it. But in the early days, it is impossible. So as I'm reading through your book, you're describing some of the challenges that you faced as a young pilot. And I'm like, man, it's really cool to read and hear about the similarities that our two different segments have. So talk about flight training for you and some of the challenges that you experienced.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, so I actually ended up meeting my future wife before flight school started. I was waiting in Pensacola and we began dating. And I told her, I said, look, I'm married to flight school. This is the most important thing in my life for the next several years. And I just poured myself into it. And thankfully, I wasn't also holding a job or have pets or anything else. It was, this is your existence in life. And it's kind of funny. My oldest son right now, I'm watching him. He's, I think, 24. And I'm imagining where I was at his age and the things we're doing and the experiences and emotions. I just remember thinking, okay, this is the most important thing in the world to me. And I'll do whatever it takes. So I would go buy 3x5 flashcards and I'd write down the things that I needed to know, because I don't just read something once and it's in there, no problem. And people who have that skill, good on you, but you make me sick.
Yes.
Because I got to study it over and over and over. Yeah. And I would chair fly. I'd take a living room chair and I'd go get a soup ladle and sit and just pretend, okay, this is what I'm going to say. This is what I'm going to see. This is what I'm going to reach in, lower the gear, lower the flaps, do these different things. Just because I was, again, a relatively average person who just didn't make everything look easy. Some things came more easily than others. And, I was blessed with health and coordination. I wasn't necessarily blessed with an iron stomach. I did get airsick. And so I had to power through that, battle through that. And then, just, again, things would come along that I know, but I just can't execute. Why? Well, that's just being a human. And so I would try to internalize that and like, how do I make this so I can just do it? Well, it takes time and repetition. And later on in my career, I didn't think twice about landing if I wasn't on the carrier or doing some of those trivial things. And again, I'll go back to a 16-year-old driver, right? When you're first driving, everything's new and a little frightening. Yeah, you've studied, maybe you've had an instructor, hopefully you have, but like, oh, lights are turning. Wait, I don't remember what that sign means. And now we shouldn't, right? But we all can drive down the road and change the channel, take a drink of something, look at my phone. And again, you shouldn't, but so you get proficiency eventually. And for me, each new skill that I was able to master took a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just for the record, I'm sitting here as a retired pilot because of flashcards. Just for the record.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I still use them as an airline pilot.
Absolutely. I bet I'm not surprised.
Partly
I'm not
because
surprised.
there's not much else you're allowed to do up at altitude when the autopilot is flying.
Flashcards are the best. They work so great for limitations and all the rote memory stuff that's required of a pilot. Certainly a naval aviator, certainly an airline pilot. They're a great tool.
You talk about chair flying. I remember I was having a particularly hard time with off airport landings. We'd go out and we're in a little R-22, and the off airport landing site that we'd go to in hindsight was as easy as it probably gets. But we'd go out there and he'd be like, okay, set it down right here. And man, it did not want to land. And when I did, it was ugly. So he'd be like, okay, give him the controls. So I'd give him the controls and he'd whip it in there so seamlessly. I'm like, how did you do that? It looks like it PFM, right? It's all magic. So I remember getting so frustrated watching him do those maneuvers seemingly so easy. And here I am all over the place. He's like, okay, we're going to go back to the hangar and you're going to chair fly these situations. So that actually was a helpful thing for me to do through chair flying. Jack, any chair flying incidents for you that you can remember?
Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
Of course. I mean, you had to. I experienced the same thing. I remember going into LZs, offsite LZs that I go, we can't fit there, and they demonstrate it to you and you go, wow, how did he do that? And then years later as a instructor, you're going back there with your students going, this is nothing, you know, it's just normal. I'm sure Jell-O can give 100 things in his naval aviation training where it was exactly like that. You looked at it and went, I'll never be able to do that. And then you eventually did it while humming a tune, you know, like singing a song or, you know, being distracted. You could do it.
And I guess that's a good point in so much as if it were easy, if I could just pick up something and drop it, like, okay, that's great, but nobody puts any value on that, right?
Yeah.
We all know you can do that. To be a pilot, to be a police officer, to be a military officer, whatever. I mean, it takes some amount of dedication and you have to change a little bit of who you are. That's why there are these ceremonies that we talked about before, because you've arrived, you've achieved, you've met the requirements, and now you are whatever it is you went off to do. So I think a struggle is okay. It's just demoralizing in the moment.
Yeah.
And of course, not everyone makes it.
Right.
Yeah.
Before we're done here, call signs is something that I enjoy. I love the tradition of call signs, and you've got a unique call sign. Talk about your call sign and how that was given to you.
Yeah, I arrived at my first squadron, VFA 86, my first fleet squadron, I should say. It was in Cecil Field, which at that time in Jacksonville, Florida, the airfield was for the Navy. And I was a brand new, fresh out of flight school student, no longer a student, but still a new pilot. You're learning every day, of course. And that was almost like the first order of business is, what do we call this guy? And so they had a whiteboard and they wrote my name up on the whiteboard and then let people come by and scrawl a different name, whatever they thought I should be. And there was some, you know, just demeaning things that were never going to go, but it was just funny, you know, going back to your prank thing. And they had a guy already, a friend of mine who's in the book, Potsy, and they had an intel officer who was Fonz. And so they're like, he's Italian looking, let's call him Chachi. You know, we'll have a Happy Days squadron. And there were a couple other names. And then someone wrote the word Jell-O, spelled capital J, then lowercase ELLO. And a department head, Terry Johnson, walks in one day and he looks at the board. I'm over there, you know, he looks at the board and he looks at me and he goes, hello, Jell-O, Aiello. And they just loved the somersaulting of it. And people walked around all day, Jell-O, Aiello, Jell-O, Aiello. And so that just became the thing. And yeah, it's it's a roller coaster name, but it was fun. And then in Top Gun, when I achieved my murder board on threat aircraft, it was my first area of expertise. You have to have a caricature made, and they have the artists that do it. And so I brought in a box of Jell-O, gelatin, and a picture of my motorcycle. And I said, hey, how about maybe I'm, you know, doing a wheelie and I'm showing the box, and the real food Jell-O is spelled capital J, lowercase ELL hyphen capital O. And so after I achieved the murder board success, I started spelling my name that way. And so you're not supposed to change your own call sign, but I think that was close enough. Nobody cared. If people still write me, and they do often the first way, I don't tell them they're wrong. If they write it the second way, then that's how I write back. And so, yeah, call signs are fun. And I certainly could have been bestowed something much worse. So I'm fine with Jell-O. I mean, what does it mean to be a Jell-O? I don't know. There was a time I used to use a lot of hair product. And so one of my squadron mates suggested they respell it with a G, like gel. But yeah, but nope, that's what it's been. And it's part of my identity to this day. I don't quite list it on, you know, when you ever fill out an official document, what other names have you been known by? You know, my wife lists her maiden name. I don't quite list Jell-O there, but otherwise it's certainly part of my identity for the last now 30-ish years.
Yeah, like we talked about offline, a lot of times kind of lose track of who people are outside of their nicknames, right?
Absolutely.
In law enforcement, as we talked about earlier, a lot of times my own squad mates, I wouldn't know what their first name was. I only knew them by their last name, which is interesting, you know, but that's just the way we operate.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I've got a ton of stuff that I want to talk about. You know, you had a really, really cool career. So I'm gonna ask our folks to go through and read your book and get some insight on some of the unique things that you did in your career. The last thing I want to talk about is something that was impactful to me, and I know will be impactful and inspiring for a lot of our listeners. You had a health scare, a major health scare. that transformed your career. Can you talk about that? How you kind of fought through that adversity and what that looked like?
Yeah. And first off, I appreciate you plugging the book. I've got one right here conveniently called Through the Yellow Visor, The Life and Misadventures of a U.S. Navy Fighter Pilot. And to be clear, right, I'm not Admiral McCraven. I'm not some great historian. I don't have 5 kills. I have no kills. It's just, if you know me through the podcast, or if you want an encouraging story, the feedback has been amazing. So I've been very blessed by that. I want to achieve the title author. I never necessarily thought of myself as a great writer, but one thing I invoked, and this wasn't unique to me, I didn't come up with it, but the Easter eggs, or what they call Chekhov's gun or Chekhov's knife, which is like in a movie, if they ever show something in the beginning, like a knife or a gun, they're going to use it later. So I had, getting into ROTC, a bit of a health scare just on a minor procedure I had on my ear at age 12. And I used that as a little bit of that Chekhov's knife for what's coming up later. And that almost kept me from not only being a pilot, but being in the military at all. Well, then when I was 39 years old and I did not screen for command of a squadron, which was in a sense the first goal I had for myself professionally that I did not achieve. And part of it was up to me, part of it wasn't. I won't bore you with all those details, but I went off to do, in a sense, a consolation prize as an operations officer on an aircraft carrier instead of as one of the squadron commanders. So same rank, 05 commander, but different job. Well, the job that I did that in, or I should say the location I did that in, was Air Wing 5 in Atsugi, Japan. And I showed up in April of 2009. And prior to that, I had always received an upchit, as we call it, which is your flight physical, meaning you're good to go for flight for another year in the month of your birth or the month before. So August or September for me of 2008. I don't even remember the physical because it was so uneventful. Well, come April of 2009, I show up in Japan, and now I need just what's called an admin upchit, meaning, hey, any changes, any problems, you're good to go. Your flight physical is coming up. You feel okay. Everything's good. Here you go. Piece of paper, administrative formality, off you go. Well, the flight surgeon who happened to look at me that day said, well, let me just check you out, which in my opinion was a process foul. Like, no, you can't look because you might find something. And as any aviator will tell you, nothing's wrong ever. I want to fly, leave me alone. Well, so he, takes his stethoscope, puts the earplugs in, puts the diaphragm on my heart. And just like saying, hey, Jell-O, you have brown hair, he goes, hey, you have a heart murmur. I'm like, whatever. What's a heart murmur? No one's ever told me that before. And he goes, well, here, you listen. And I'm listening like, I don't know. I hear a ba-boom, ba-boom. I mean, that's a heart. And so, he was trying to get me to appreciate something I had no training in. Well, I stiff-armed him from doing anything about it from April till September when my birth month came and it was time for a flight physical. And by now I'm on USS George Washington. I've been out there all summer flying. And another flight surgeon, same situation, but now, it's the right process. He's supposed to check everything. And he gets to the stethoscope and he goes, hey, you have a heart murmur. I'm like, yeah, that's what your buddy said back in April, but I feel fine. So I am fine. And he goes, no, we're going to get this checked out. The book has whole chapters about this. I'll keep it very brief. We pull back into Japan. I go to a Japanese cardiologist. The young technician either didn't speak English or ignored my questions, but she does an echocardiogram on my heart, sends the results to my flight surgeon. He looks at him. He goes, okay, wow. We're going to send you to Tripler in Army Medical Center in Hawaii, and we'll send your wife with you. And we had a 2-year-old child at the time who just now graduated high school about a month ago. And we took him along. We sent the other boys to be with friends and went down thinking, everything's fine or whatever. They're just doing their due diligence. And I go down there and another technician, this one now a Navy corpsman, does the thing. And, I've got my head firmly planted in the ground, guys. I'm full on ostrich mode. But it's like, okay, I'm down here like, hey, I'm looking at his scope. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. People tell me there's something going on, you see anything? And, he's looking at his scope over here. He's got the heart thing on me. And he goes, he doesn't even look at me. He goes, I'll let the doctor talk to you. And so they get done with that. He takes me to the waiting room. He goes, stay here. And again, trying to keep this quick, the doctor comes in and he goes, hey, you have mitral valve prolapse. I'm like, so what does that mean? And he goes, well, you have leaflets on one of your valves, the mitral valve, that open and close like the top of a milk carton. And one side is not, it's flopping around. And because of that, your heart, which is a pump, is twice as big as normal. It's like it's trying to get the blood where it needs to go, but the blood is going the wrong way. And long story short, if we don't fix this, you're going to just either need a heart transplant or you're going to drop dead one day. And quick side story, pilot friend of mine, his brother died of the same thing, and they didn't catch it. Thank God they did for me. So long story short, my boss's wife flies my 2 kids down from Japan so they can be there. My 2 brothers and one of their wives show up. My mom shows up. My mother-in-law shows up. Everybody shows up in Hawaii because they're going to hopefully fix this thing. And if they're not going to fix it, they're going to replace it. We showed up in Hawaii on a Tuesday. The following Monday, I'm under the knife and my heart didn't beat for something over 80 minutes while the doctor, that's a whole nother miracle that I learned, by the way, writing the book, became friends with a cardiologist. The cardiothoracic surgeon happened to be a reservist who specialized in mitral valve repairs and was on his active 2-week duty at Tripler when I showed up.
Wow.
And so when my cardiologist buddy told me that, it blew my mind. Like, you kidding? He goes, yeah, if he hadn't have been there, they would have just said they're going to replace the valve. And they're going to do it either with a tissue valve that only lasts a dozen years and you'll do it again, or a mechanical valve. You have to take Coumadin and blood thinner the rest of your life. Either way, I probably never would have flown again. So talk about, I don't know what you all believe, but to me, there's got to be a God with stories like that. Anyway, long story short, again, I keep saying that, but I keep making it long. But it's amazing. Again, that's why I wrote the book.
It's incredible.
I spent 3 years not flying. And if you now piece some of our conversation together, you remember I talked about being in San Diego and had a job and in a place in life where I was. So that was it. I was recovering from that. I was in a staff job I detested, no longer flying, which is what I was put on earth to do, I felt like. I spent 3.5 years working with the Navy, who never told me absolutely not quit asking. It was always like, ask again in 6 months, ask again in a year, 2 years, 3 years. So as I was waiting, I took an assignment to Afghanistan on the ground as a staff officer because, number one, I didn't like the staff job in San Diego, but number two, a combat physical I thought might help my case. And lo and behold, I was under the knife in September of 2009. And in October of 2012, 3 years later, the Navy said, we'll let you fly again.
Wow.
That's inspiring.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So it all worked out. The surgery they did do, it obviously worked like a charm and corrected the problem, and you were able to fight back.
Coming up on 16 years later, my heart is still just as good, they say, as anyone else's. And yeah, I mean, the happy ending was that I had a job opportunity that I was able to take to go back to Fallon, which is the Mecca, go back to flying the F-18 Hornet and Super Hornet after 3.5 years on the bench, and even got a bonus F-16 qual as kind of one last, here you go have some fun with that. And I'm glad I did, because I set some personal bests of 9 Gs and 100 or Mach 1.93, almost Mach 2.
Wow.
So
that's cool. Incredible.
That story is super inspiring. As I said, I relate to that in, I think it was, maybe June of 17. I'm going to get the month wrong. I started having neck problems, and I go get that investigated. Long story short, it turns out I'm going to have neck surgery.
Oh.
And the neck surgery that I'm going to have, nobody's ever returned to the line of duty in my department after having it. It was a full disc replacement. When people were telling me, naysayers, essentially your career as a police officer is over. And I remember walking into my sergeant's office and telling him, like, hey, this is what I'm looking at. And I had just finished my commercial writing as a pilot. I'd accomplished my goal and dream of being a pilot. I'm in the very early phases of the training process to be a police helicopter pilot. And here comes this. And long story short, I have surgery. Surgery was successful, was able to fight my way back to work after, it was only 8 months. I remember getting back in the seat, not knowing if I was going to be able to manipulate the controls or if it was going to be a lost art, and then I'd have to relearn everything all over again. I picked it up like a bike. Was that the same experience you had when you sat back in the cockpit?
Certain things. The very first flight was amazing. And certain things came back to me, certain things didn't. And the longer answer to that question is when I did get to Fallon, all the things that I thought I knew from 4 years ago, a lot of them had changed because tactics and threats and things change. And my proficiency just wasn't there. I didn't get, and I'm not blaming the squadron that provided the refresher training, but I didn't get a really detailed refresher. It was mostly the minimum hours you need and off you go. I wasn't as proficient as I wanted to be. And in the story, in the epilogue, I do talk about, it should have been the perfect happy ending, but in reality, it was 2013. So there was sequestration, which made budgets hard. My skills weren't as good. I was older, so my reflexes were, not as good, and it kind of ruined it. But even so, I did make it back into a cockpit. So that's good enough. You just have to manage your expectations. But yeah, I did struggle. Even at the end, I struggled.
Yeah. Fighting through those challenging times is critical.
Yeah.
Or the podcast, the Team Never Quit podcast was big for me at the time. They talked about a lot of those circumstances. So it was big for me to fight back and get back in the seat. Unfortunately, 4 years later, almost to the date, I ended up having a second neck surgery, and that was the end. But did get to go back and become I would like to consider myself a proficient pilot, and got to do all the things I wanted to do, and that was great.
Good.
Being that we're short in time, the last question I have for you is really a question for future aviators. What advice do you have for someone who was in the position you were in as a young aspiring aviator? What career advice would you offer, and what inspiration would you offer for those folks? Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 160 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Well, first off, I would say make sure you're doing it for the right reason. People who do things for other people won't put in my opinion, the persistence and tenacity needed and effort to do it as if they're doing it for themselves. So make sure you're in the right place, first off. And then if you are, just give yourself grace. I mean, there's going to be certain things you're good at that come easily. There's going to be certain things you struggle with that other people make look easy. Give yourself the grace to know that you're human, you're imperfect. And if you can continue to try and have a good attitude, that you will hopefully prevail. Not everyone does. I acknowledge that. But more often than not, you will. And even if you don't, just realize that you are on a journey unlike anyone else's. Your path is not like my path. My path will not be the path that you can do. And people who listen to the Fighter Pilot podcast might think, I want to go do what Jell-O did. I go to college and then flight school and then fly jets and go to Top Gun. Well, you might do that, but who knows? I mean, the world is different. You're different than me. The budgets, the airplanes. So I think you got to be adaptable and just realize that whether it's God or the universe, whatever you believe, has a journey for you that's unlike anyone else's. And you have to embrace that and walk it. And when you do, try to enjoy it, because life is short and it's precious. And I think we all probably know people we've lost. In my case, a brother. So you realize that we're not here. Nothing's guaranteed. Tomorrow, certainly not.
Yeah.
And success, no. Pain-free living, no. And I'm sure you can attest to that, John, with your next situation. So try to enjoy the journey. I mean, we're here for some question that, of course, is existential. So depending on how you look at that, it might be to have fun. It might be to make money. It might be to stop bad guys. It might be to rob banks. And so, I don't know. I don't have the answer, but I know that I'm here, and there seems to be things that I'm blessed to do and able to do and want to do, and just try to enjoy the journey. And like we hinted at earlier, if you're doing it and that's what you want to do and you feel like you're here to do it, great. But if that's not necessarily what is fun for you, well, then make sure you take the time to go have fun. And that can change. I mean, later on in life, I've begun fly fishing, and I really enjoy just spending time where trout live, because I think it's beautiful environments. And when you are blessed with one that'll take your fly, it's a fun connection. Yeah. And so that changes, it's not what I probably would have done in my mid-20s. That might've been another pursuit of sorts. But make time for fun and just enjoy the journey, because it's why we're here.
Love it. Jack, any closing thoughts before we head out?
Wow, so many things, but I'll just keep it short and just say, first of all, thanks, Jell-O. Honored to have you here. Really, really great. You're doing great things with the Fighter Pilot podcast, through the Yellow Visor book. I mean, that's fantastic. And the two things that I really that I really liked today were about debriefing, where you said, in order to learn, you have to debrief. I love that. And the crisis of confidence. Everyone has those crises, everyone. And that if a naval aviator, an accomplished naval aviator says that and brings that up, that term, then you know that we all have it. I mean, naval aviation is a special thing. Everyone knows that there are a lot of reasons, but for you to open up and say, hey, I had that is impressive. And the fact that you told us about it, and the fact that we talked through it and how you got through it. So those are really two highlights of a lot of highlights.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being with us, Jell-O. It was great.
You're welcome. I appreciate the opportunity to come speak with you, gentlemen, and it's been a lot of fun. You've been very gracious about the Fighter Pilot podcast, and I appreciate that. Without giving too much away, because I haven't really said too much yet, but probably the pace that you're used to for the past 8 years will not always be the pace that we'll keep. We've had hundreds of episodes, a lot of good times. And as life continues to change, as the book is now out, there could be some changes coming around year end that hopefully you avid listeners will find out about then and understand. And so, yeah, not quite ready to fully unveil all that, but yeah, the show has blessed many. I'm grateful to have the reins of it, and changes are coming probably at the beginning of 2026.
All right. Well, you've inspired me. Thank you for your podcast, your passion for the industry. We know you're not doing the podcast to make money, because there's no millionaires, I don't think, unless you're Joe Rogan in the podcast space. But you've done it with professionalism, with skill. You've inspired countless folks through the book, through the podcast. Thank you for that. So on that, we'll head out. That way you can move on with your day. And appreciate you, sir. And we'll catch you later. Cheers.
Sounds good. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks for joining us today on the Hangar Z Podcast. That conversation with Jell-O was absolutely amazing. He's a great aviator and a podcaster and an author, and it was really fun. We got a lot out of that. That was fun, John. Good catch there.
Absolutely. A lot of the stuff he talked about, essentially not taking life for granted, and reaching out to the folks that have been impactful in your life and thanking them, I think are so important. How many people regret not having said something nice to somebody, and then that person passes away and you didn't get an opportunity to tell them exactly how you felt.
That's right.
So I love what he said about that.
I did too. Huge. That was really good. But we wanted to come back on with you, with our listeners and the people that watch us too, and just add a little something for you. And that's talking about the 5th year anniversary. This is amazing how far this podcast has come in the 5 years. And it all started, we talked about it in the podcast. We talk about it all the time, but even with Jell-O, how this started with John just thinking, hey, this would be kind of neat, kind of a hobby. And it is so much more than that. And so I think it's important that we share a little bit more of that. And I'm going to interview John here a little bit and ask him a few things about this past 5 years. So John, again, congratulations on 5 years. Thanks. A huge accomplishment, especially because you didn't anticipate this, right? I mean, you had no idea this was going to happen.
No, zero idea. It was not a goal. It really was. This was a hobby, a way to, I guess, address some of my natural curiosities that I had about our industry and to, make a community, tighten our community a bit. Yeah. Never to make this a job. That certainly wasn't, what I had in mind.
Yeah. So let's talk about 5 years. That's a long time. A lot of guests. Talk about some impactful guests. Let's start with that. I know there's many. Just since I've been on board, oh my gosh, we talk about this all the time, how guests have impacted us both and how huge that is. But you've got a lot more episodes under your belt and a lot more time than before I came along to join you on this ride. Talk about the most impactful guests to you. And you notice I said guests because I know it can't be just one.
Well, it's so hard to pinpoint, but I think for me the hardest guest to start with was number one, because it was an unknown. I remember coming up with the concept of the Hangar Z podcast, and there was 2 people I presented the idea to. One was my friend Kevin Hart, who was my partner at the time. One of my best friends. We're partners. He was my CFI. we're flying around the city. I think it was late at night and we're kind of bored. There's no calls for service going on. And you know, I think I was even nervous asking Kevin. I'm like, hey, what would you think? Because Kevin will tell you, you know, if he thinks if it's ridiculous, he's like, no, you're not doing that. What would you think if I started a podcast on public safety aviation, in particular law enforcement aviation? And he thought for a second. He's like, yeah, that's a great idea. And I was shocked that he'd said that first off, because I thought he'd laugh me out of the helicopter. Then the next person I go to is Eric Widener. Eric was the sergeant that selected me to air support. He's now retired, working for CNC. You know, he's one of the founders of CNC. But I go to Eric and I'm like, hey, I have this concept. What do you think? And I'm kind of expecting him to do what I thought Kevin would do, kind of laugh me out of the hangar type thing. It's his hangar is next door to Ontario Air Sport's hangar, which is Ontario Air Sport hangar is the Hangar Z. So that's where the Hangar Z podcast name originated from. So, you know, I'm no grammar expert, but I think Hangar Y is next to Hangar Z. So I go into Hangar Y and I'm, you know, ask Eric and he thinks it's a great idea. So then I'm like, well, okay, not only am I going to ask you your advice, but will you be the first guest? I was so nervous to ask that. And, you know, we go into that first recording and not only did I have equipment that was subpar, to say the least, yeah. I had no experience doing what I was about to do. And I think that was definitely it was the most challenging interview. And it was also the most impactful because that's where it got off the ground. And I got a chance to interview somebody who I consider to be a mentor and still do to this day. I love Eric.
And what a good choice. I mean, I'm sure Eric made that much easier on you than had you gone and grabbed somebody that maybe you didn't know or worked around. I mean, Eric's so easy to talk to. We had him on recently to talk about canine stuff. We're both around him at conventions. We got to see Eric for a little bit this week in Phoenix. He's just such a great guy and an experienced law enforcement officer and supervisor. That probably made it easy for you in many ways.
100%. Eric is one of the kindest people you ever meet. His ability to tell stories and to impersonate people is amazing. So yeah, 100% it made it easy. And the topic was great. It's one that I still cling to today. I think it's really important, marketing your air support unit.
Oh yeah.
We talk about that all the time. There's many ways to market your unit, whether it's to the public or internally to your own police department, your own folks trying to get people, you know, to recruit to come to aviation, or administrators within the police department, you know, the chief, the city hall staff. Right. That was all really important. So that was a good topic. And like you said, we've had him on many times since then. So it was great.
How about some other ones? What other ones jump out at you where you go, wow? I mean, we'll let the audience know our little secret. We click stop recording and we say goodbye to our guests. And within minutes, you and I usually text or call each other and go, whoa, that was unbelievable. And it happens over and over and over. So I know that, but tell me about a couple that really wowed you, where you look back on them and go, wow, we were really lucky to have that person, or that was so impactful compared to what I expected. Talk about a couple others.
Jimmy Hatch, when we had him on solo, you know, what he has gone through, the adversity that he's overcome in his own personal life, and the things that he's done in the wake of that adversity has been absolutely amazing.
Yes.
The book that he wrote, Touching the Dragon, I honestly think should be required reading in the police academy.
It should.
Know, it's so impactful and it highlights so many things that most law enforcement officers, most public safety folks will encounter during the course of their career. Just to me, it should be required reading. We had him on again with Al Mack, and those two combined were man, absolutely amazing. And I think I bring those up not because, because they are amazing. The stories both of them had were amazing. But when I look within our own community, every conversation we have from folks from different agencies, I'm always so thankful that they come on the podcast and are willing to tell their story and be a bit vulnerable. You know, we talk about things that we find important to our community. Mental health is a big part of that. And a lot of people are willing to open up and be vulnerable and talk about some of the things that they've experienced for the betterment of our community. And I think that's huge.
Yeah. That was episodes 100 and 101. I remember it vividly because those were my first two episodes with you as a co-host. And Jimmy was incredible. He exposes himself to his story is exposed to the world in his book, Touching the Dragon, and then he did it on the podcast. And I wasn't surprised, but I got done with that one too and went, that is incredible. This is going to help people. No doubt this is going to help people. And I'm with you, John. Every recruit in a fire academy, police academy, paramedics training, and military should read that as they're being trained, as they're entering, to understand what potentials can lie ahead and what things you need to do to help yourself with the mental wellness side of these positions. It's so important. Talk about that. Talk about the importance of mental wellness, because that's a theme that you have pushed and that we have accomplished, I think, a lot on. But talk about the mental wellness side and how important that is with the Hangar Z.
Well, I think, having grown up in a law enforcement household, I've been surrounded with law enforcement and the law enforcement community and our culture my whole life, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to mental health. And I think the ugly part of our industry is it was buried and there was a negative stigma associated with positive mental health in the past. I think we've made huge strides going forward. I think, if you look back 20 years even, there's been a huge difference in the stigma that's associated with positive mental health. Having been involved in a couple critical incidents, I realized how important it is to have the proper resources to help through critical incidents. And I realized mental health isn't only for those that have been in critical incidents, it's for everybody, because, all the things that we do over the course of our career all add up, whether you consider it to be a critical incident or not, it adds up. So I just feel like, given my exposure to the community throughout my life and, what I've seen, I just feel like it's a conversation that needs to be had over and over and over again to try and lessen that stigma. So that's kind of my thought process there.
It's a good thought process. The more we talk about it, the less stigma. That's a given. I mean, that's absolutely true. When it wasn't talked about, think about it. In the past, you didn't talk about it. No one did, but yet we knew it was there, and it was affected some more than others, but we knew it was there, and yet we all avoided the topic. And there are people that aren't with us anymore because we avoided that topic. Mm-hmm. They didn't get the help they needed from their peers, or from the department, or from the VA, or whoever it is. So I'm thrilled that you're excited about that topic, as I am, and I love that we revisit that as often as we can. Any others that jump out at you?
As far as topics go?
Yeah, topics or guests or...
Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, sole 6-axis EO-IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking.
So I think one thing that's interesting to me is when I consider, when I was a kid, I wanted to either be a professional baseball player or a pilot. And I thought either one of those were so far out of the realm of possibilities that I just wrote it off. I thought you had to go to the military or have, some weird existence in aviation that I didn't have access to become a pilot. Well, little did I know until my friend Kevin Hart, who I just talked about earlier, called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to come to aviation?" That was even a possibility. So I like exploring people's backgrounds and finding the unique ways that, folks have found their way into our industry, because there's not a cut and dry way. There's not a one size fits all approach to getting into an industry that we all love. So I like exploring people's backgrounds and how they got into our industry. One, it's inspiring for the folks that aren't there, and it's interesting for me to reflect on that as well. So yeah, I think the exploration of backgrounds and pathways is really important. And then just best practice conversations I really love. Things that work for you may not work for me, but I could take bits and pieces of it that do work. The idea that we shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel with a lot of these things that we want to do, because there's someone who's already done, if you have an airborne use of force program, there's probably a program that is about to start that could benefit from the knowledge you have. So, that's something that I've wanted to not expose, but to talk about quite a bit, best practice stuff, so other folks could pick up on that. Again, just coming out of AppsCon, one of the things I absolutely love about going to AppsCon is you get to go to a place and you're surrounded by the industry's best. You hear all the stories, you go to the classes, and that's great. But it was, at the time, it ended as soon as the conference was over, and you'd rest on those stories and those things you learned for the next year until AppsCon happened again. So my goal in talking to these folks, our guests, is to continue these stories so that people are learning throughout the year. And it's not just this one time a year we get together and learn about, critical incident debriefs or whatever the topic was.
Yeah. Tell us about some feedback that you've gotten. I mean, you've gotten a lot of feedback. Just the past week, it was unbelievable. We got mobbed with feedback. But tell us about some impactful feedback over the years that you've gotten and how it maybe revitalized you or kept you going or, motivated you to say, wow, we have got to keep this going. Anything jump out at you?
Yeah, I think the best compliment that we've ever received is from someone who listened to the podcast because they wanted to go to aviation. We're not there yet. And because of the information shared by our guests and the conversation we have in the podcast, they were able to use that information and apply that to whether it was their interview or however they got into their unit, and they're now there. That to me is gold,
Yes.
And this is our fourth AppsCon, I believe. And after every year we leave AppsCon, I'm reinvigorated. I'm inspired because of the stories that people tell. And a lot of times they're around those types of incidents where, hey, I just got into the unit because of what you're telling me. And I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah.
But people, they get positions at their work that they want because of the podcast. They make career and life decisions based on information and folks that are on the podcast. That is mind blowing to me.
Yeah, it is. It is. And last but not least, let's wrap up with this. The future. What do you envision here, John? I know you have a lot of ideas, and we've talked about some of them, but you're constantly thinking about the next podcast or the next event or the next evolution of what you've created here. Give us some thoughts about that.
Well, I have to go back to a partnership with Vertical and Mike and MHM Publishing, and that partnership has launched the podcast into an area that I never thought was possible.
Sure.
The incorporation of the video podcast has been huge. I see the video podcast component of what we're doing continue to grow, expanding our audience, or I should say our guests outside of our traditional guest lists to bring different kinds of conversations that I think will be impactful and inspiring. But I think in a lot of ways more of the same. I think hearing best practice, hearing from the best folks in the industry, hearing those stories, to me, can never get old. I want to rest on that as the foundation for what we're doing. Telling the stories, whether you're from a small 2-person aviation unit that might be part-time somewhere in a rural community to, LAPD with the fleet of aircraft that you have. There's stories to be learned from each of those agencies and each of those types. And they come in unexpected ways,
They do.
But I'm blown away when I look backwards and even to the beginning of our partnership with Vertical and where we started and where we are now. I love the integration of the podcasts with the written medium and the videos. I think of myself as a consumer a lot of times, and I'm like, if I really like a topic, I'm going to want to read an article on it. I'm going to want to watch a video, especially if it's created by Lloyd, and then listen to a conversation about it. So, that's the kind of thing that I'd like to see more and more of, are those types of that type of content where everything's wrapped into one, and you can just consume that content in all kinds of different ways.
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway buzzword. Listen up and remember this word because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's buzzword is debrief. Visit contest.verticalhelicast.com to enter the buzzword.
Yeah, that's been really, really cool. The MHM Publishing has a huge audience, and we're kind of able to tag into that, and chip into that audience, and they just back us up and assist us so much with broadening our audience and getting the word out. And I'm with you. The collaboration on video, print, and podcasts, some of the best stuff in the past year and a half has been where we've done that. And we got a lot of comments about it, this week, saying, "Oh, that was really a great podcast, and I loved the video, or I loved the article that went with that, and we learned so much." And that's the goal. That's the goal. And MHM has made that possible. No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
One of the things I'm most excited about is the Blades of Valor tour that we've started doing every year, where we go and visit a handful of agencies that are doing phenomenal work and get to promote the stuff that they're doing, and how that's evolved into the Blades of Valor recognition program. And that's going to spin off something that is unknown at this time. But I think, in our industry, we do a great job of talking about the equipment we use, promoting the aircraft that we fly. We don't do as great of a job as an industry as a whole about promoting the folks that actually do that. So this new program, recognizing folks, whether you're a maintainer, you might be a fiscal analyst behind the scenes, like Zena at Ontario, she runs the program, but she's not a sworn police officer. Folks like her, she deserves to be recognized for the hard work that makes a lot of these missions possible. And then, of course, the folks that are actually flying in adverse conditions to make rescues happen, like what you saw in Texas, what you saw in North Carolina. It's happening all over the world. Promoting those air crews through the recognition program, through the podcast, is something that I love. Absolutely love that.
Yeah, it is amazing. And John and I talk a lot about broadening our audience and keeping the roots with public safety aviation. But for instance, the podcast we just completed, it's a naval aviator. Second one in a month that we've talked to. Are there parallels? And we're finding out when we talk to them, there's lots. I mean, it's not just interesting because most people, are interested in fighter pilots and Blue Angels and things like that. But it also has the parallels. Talking about risk with Scooter, talking about debriefing with Jell-O. That's what we're looking for. We're really looking for guests that can entertain, inform us, and make us think and motivate us and maybe save us, in some ways, especially when we're talking about mental health and mental wellness. When people ask me, what's your favorite episode? I still say Tanya Glenn. Yeah. I just do. And Tanya is a doctor, dealing with PTS. If you haven't watched or listened to that podcast, you have to. Yep. She was incredible. I wish I had that podcast to listen to on day one of the police academy, and I didn't. We'd all be in a better place. So I love that we're impacting and broadening our audience and doing all that. But it all started with Eric Widener. Eric, well done accepting that challenge to be on the podcast and to motivate John and Kevin. Way to go. Way to go, Kevin, for saying, John, you should do that. That's pretty cool. I'm sure happy you did it. Yeah. And you've done great things. And I will continue to say that you are the creator of the Hangar Z podcast, because that was a big deal. So again, congratulations on 5 years.
Yeah, thank you. When, for you, when you look back over the course of your time here with the podcast and the episodes you've listened to in the past, what have been impactful episodes for you?
Wow, some of them are the same. Jimmy Hatch, the first one I was with you, boy. I mean, I had read the book multiple times. I had met Jimmy. I got to know Jimmy before, and he still really impacted me with what he said. That was a big one. Tanya, Dr. Tanya Glenn, incredible. Again, just information that I just wasn't familiar with. Alan Mack was a big one. Flying in the horse soldiers and the risk and the risk analysis and the risk management that we talked about with Alan. It just goes into what we do. And then I can't pick just one of all the aircrew people that we have, had on that are just fascinating from all these different units. And you just learn. We walk away all the time and go, wow, I learned a lot. I didn't know any of that. Heck, I've had friends come on this podcast and we get done. Kevin Gallagher comes to mind, chief pilot at LAPD. I've known Kevin since he came there as a TFL. I learned things about him that I did not know. So that tells me we're getting some good information out there. If I'm learning something about somebody I know very well, then I think we're doing okay. And so, those things jump out at me. The leadership stuff, again, it covers a wide variety of guests we've had on. Terry Machi and Jim McDonnell. And I mean, the leadership, Eric Whiter was a lot of leadership stuff. So I love what you're doing, and I love being a part of it. And it's an honor to be here with you, but it all started with an idea and motivation and some risk. I mean, you could have fallen flat in your face.
Yeah.
You didn't. And here we are.
Yeah.
5 years. Most podcasts do not last a year.
Yeah.
And you're at 5, John. Great job.
Thanks.
Great job.
I'm super thankful. Again, go back to a lot of folks in the beginning were very supportive, very influential. And because of that, this has lasted, the length that it has. So I'm, again, super thankful. My mom, I'll keep plugging her, and she was a champion for me, and I'm forever grateful for that. So, I have to, before we're done here, also thank Jeff Rakovich. He spent a lot of time helped me figure out how to navigate this thing. We sacrificed a lot of time making these early episodes, but having you on board, I remember, I talk about this quite a bit. A young police officer sitting in your class in the auditorium of the Fontana Steelworkers course. And somebody said, hey, you got to take Jack Chenley's class. I'm like, okay. So I took it, and it was honestly the best class that I ever took as a police officer. And I'm not saying that because I'm here talking with you. It really, really is good. It doesn't matter if you're in aviation or if you're in patrol or detectives, doesn't matter where you are. The information you get from that class is not found in many places. You not only have the information and experience, but the ability to present the class in a way that's entertaining. Not that you go to a class to be entertained, but it helps, right? So that was really cool. I remember asking you as the first time, like, hey, would you be a guest? And I was like nervous to ask you to be a guest in the podcast. As I'm pretty sure, like, I don't got time for you, kid. Get out of here.
Oh, yeah.
But you said yes, and here we are. Year and a half. 2 years later?
Yeah, coming up on 2.
And it's been phenomenal. Joint goal, I think, of promoting the industry. I think at the end of the day, that's our main goal. It's just to promote the good work that's being done day in, day out by public safety crews.
That's right. Yeah, we are on the same page on that. And, everything all your goals that you laid out in the beginning of all this, I was like, yep, I'm all in on that. Oh, you want to work on leadership? You want to go work on mental wellness? Yep. I mean, they're important topics and important goals. And now we have a platform that we're working on together to accomplish that and draw new guests to talk about that. So I'm thrilled to be here. Glad to be here, boss. And hope it just keeps rolling. Looking forward to what comes next.
Yeah, absolutely. He said, glad to be here, boss. Made me laugh because, obviously reference to the Blue Angels and that interview we had with Scooter, that was something I wanted to do since I was a kid. And, here he is, this F-14 pilot. He comes in and we're having this conversation, and man, stuff like that is just mind blowing that we get to be in the same room and have conversations with the likes of him and Jell-O and, just really, really cool people outside of the normal day-to-day conversations we have. So I would just like to throw one more thing out for our listeners. If you have a topic or a guest in mind that you think would be great to be covered, let us know. A lot of the times those references, referrals are the best source of information for us to come up with who's going to be next and what path we're going to go down. Because there's so many interesting people in our community that we know personally we get referred to, but the more the better. The more good stories that we could promote and tell, better off our community is for having heard that. Yeah. So please send us some referrals. Those are great.
Yeah. And I'll just wrap this up by saying one thing John and I talk about a lot is our appreciation of all of you that listen or watch or both. We really appreciate your support. Keep spreading the word. Share it, like it, subscribe to it. Please keep doing that. It makes it possible. And we promise you that we will do our best to keep bringing on interesting, entertaining, educational guests as best we can. And we love the suggestions. We've gotten a few this week that are gold. So to our listeners, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll piggyback there and just thank everybody from the bottom of my heart. We obviously wouldn't be here without the support of you, without the support of our sponsors.
That's right.
The support of Mike and Linda Reno at Image and Publishing. Derek Cast, he's a huge part of our team, and he's hiding behind the curtains all the time. Rob and David, the producers for the Podcast platform. You guys do incredible work. You make us all sound intelligent with your editing skills. There's so many great podcasts, a part of the Helicast platform now. The Real Rescue with Jason Quinn. I wish I had the energy that he does. Halsey Scheider with the Helicopter Podcast. Great conversations he's having over there. The Valor Flight Crew Podcast, which is our most recent one. Huge on the helicopter air ambulance side of things. And then the maintenance podcast. That is arguably the most undervalued, over neglected segment of our industry. It's really cool to shine a light on the work that our maintainers are doing. Linda recently came up with a quote that I read and love. It's no maintenance, no mission. Without our maintenance folks, we would not get to do the missions we do. So that podcast is dedicated to promoting the good work that's being done on that side. So
yeah, great job. I'm glad we had this time to talk a little bit here at the end with some time after Jell-O. And with that, thanks again, everybody. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, and we'll catch you the next time on the Hangar Z Podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 160-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, sole 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking.